Greetings, time traveller. Listen to the breath of distant epochs, where life is born beyond the fog of billions of years, knowing neither man nor star cities. Other forces rule here, primordial, slow, like the very flow of stones. If this ancient silence and the smell of moist earth are close to you, subscribe and put a sign of attention, and then together we'll open the gates to the world where everything began. Light breaks through the morning steam billowing over the calm water, cloudy, heavy, with an admixture of sulphur. The air is thick, and every breath seems to stick to the lungs. Immobility lies above the ancient marshes, broken only by the splash of an invisible body in the mud. This is the end of the Devonian period, a time when seas and land slowly change places, when life takes its first timid step out of the depths onto solid ground. Ripples caused by the movement of shelled fish, heavy and slow, glide across the smooth surface of stagnant waters. Their bodies, protected by bone shields, seem to be made of stone itself. Here, in these warm waters, life does not yet know the fear of land predators, because the land itself is not yet ready to accept life. The scent of decay is in the air-damp wood, moss and invisible spores filling every ray of light. The first shoots of prawns and horsetails rise from the water, thin and flexible, like children's fingers reaching for the sun. Drops sparkle on their stems like eyes watching the slow birth of the morning world. Somewhere in the distance, a crunching sound is heard. This is a shelled fish hitting the hard shell of prey with its jaw, grinding flesh and chitin. Every movement here has weight. Every sound is born slowly, like the breathing of the earth. At the border of water and land, where the clay turns into a sticky quagmire, something new slips out. The body of this creature looks like a fish, but there is something else in its movement, careful, as if it is aware of the firmament under its fins. This is one of the first amphibians similar to Tiktalia. His skin glitters under the viscous light, and his eyes, round, motionless, reflect the stillness of the world. He makes a short push, moving forward, leaving a trail in the soft ground. Every movement is difficult, but in this work is hidden the idea of nature itself, to get out of the water to breathe the air. And with every step, with every movement of his fins, the earth seems to remember this path. A slow wind passes over the marshes, carrying pollen and the smells of distant forests. Where trees don't have leaves yet, but only soft spore feathers, future forests are already forming. The first predators of land roam in these shadows, primitive arthropods, giant centipedes that reach the length of a human. Their chitinous bodies shine like wet amber, and when they move, they leave behind a rustle reminiscent of the sound of falling rain. Sometimes a slight movement flashes over the swamp. This is an ancient dragonfly with a wingspan exceeding the length of an arm, taking off over the water surface, carrying small prey in its claws. The sun gradually rises higher, turning the steam into warm smoke, spreading over the lowlands. The light glides over the creatures' bodies, animating their shapes, as if testing the strength of their bodies and bones. In these rays, another world appears, not the same as the usual one, but slow, heavy, devoid of the sound of human speech. Here, every move is a survival, every breath is a test, and yet life stretches upward, deep to the sides, without knowing fatigue. By evening, a thick haze covers the marshes. The water turns dark like oil, and only occasional splashes remind of the presence of living beings. Tiny lights flicker above the surface of the water, between clouds of steam, bioluminescent organisms that illuminate the night with a soft blue glow. In their light, one can distinguish the motionless bodies of dead fish and shells, which have already begun to turn into sediment, the future fuel of distant times. So day gives way to night, but in this darkness life does not stop. She breathes, crawls, waits, preparing for a new dawn. And beyond the edge of the horizon, under a heavy sky, the shadows of the future are already beginning to move. The first reptiles, the first predators of the land, in which something is emerging that will one day be called power over the planet. The sun hangs over the plain like molten metal. The air is trembling with heat, and the entire surface of the earth seems to be swaying, turning into a shaky sea of stone. Millions of years have passed, the swamps have retreated, The rivers have dried up, and the moist forests of ancient Devonian have turned into low thickets of horsetails and tree ferns, with roots going into cracked clay. The earth breathes hot wind soaked in dust and tar. This is the beginning of the Permian period, a time when creatures carved from the most ancient times become the lords of the land, paleozoics. Their bodies are heavy, but adapted to the new, dry world. Huge sails rise on their backs, bony appendages connected by skin like the sail of a ship catching the sun's heat to warm the blood. The slow dawn turns the plain the colours of ash and copper. The body of a paleozoic lies on the shore of a drying lake. His skin is rough and scaly, covered with dust. Her eyes are closed, and her breathing is barely noticeable. There is a quiet work going on inside the huge body. The solar sail slowly heats up the blood, forcing the heart to move faster again. After a while, the beast rises, heavily rearranging its paws, leaving deep footprints in the sand. His head, elongated with teeth like jagged blades, turns to the wind. There is an ancient dignity in this movement, almost calmness, because he knows that the plain belongs to him. There is a smell of hot stone, superheated resin and salt in the air. Insects crawl among the sparse trees huge as a palm. Their bodies shimmer with shades of copper. Sometimes a shadow sweeps over the ground, an ancient dragonfly, a descendant of those that soared over the swamps of Devon, flies in search of prey. But silence reigns over this whole world. She's not dead. There's a wariness hidden in her, as if the planet itself is waiting for a change. Hills can be seen far away on the horizon, from where smoke stretches, not from fire, but from the fumes of sulphur springs left over from ancient seas. In these places, life adapts to a new, cruel rhythm. The day burns, the night cools, and the one who knows how to accumulate heat in his bones survives. Other creatures, small, fast, and lizard-like, hide among the rocks where the wind grinds the stone. Their skin is moist, their breathing is rapid, and their eyes twinkle in the semi-darkness. They are the future that has not yet realized itself. There is something different in their movements, unlike the heavy tread of paleozoics. They are lighter, faster, and there is a cautious gleam in their eyes, the germ of curiosity, an instinct that in millions of years will lead to a completely different life. In the meantime, they hide in the cracks, listening to a giant with a sail pass through the plain, and try to remain unnoticed. When the sun sinks to the west, the world turns purple. The air thickens, and for a brief moment it gets cooler. Paleozoics gather near bodies of water, rare, murky, with the smell of sulphur. They stand motionless, catching the last rays of light with their backs, like huge leaves facing the sun. Their breathing becomes more regular, and their eyes are half closed. Rare sounds can be heard around, the crackle of dried stems, the rustle of insect wings, the distant cry of a nocturnal predator. This is not peace, but a lull before the night brings back the cold and darkness to the world. The night in these lands is heavy and slow. The darkness falls in a dense layer. The smell of the earth becomes stronger, and the breathing of the creatures becomes louder. In the moonlight, the sails of paleozoics gleam like dark metal fabrics. They stand motionless, saving heat, while clouds creep over them, low and dark as smoke. Somewhere nearby, a shadow glides over the stones, a small creature, barely noticeable, but already different. His skin is dry, his eyes are adapted to the night. It breathes less frequently, moves more confidently, and its physique reveals the features of future predators that will replace paleozoics when the sun gets too hot even for them. This is how day and night pass in a world where life has already learned to own the land, but still does not know how to say goodbye to the past. The ground beneath your feet holds traces of water, and the air is an echo of ancient swamps. Every stone feels the breath of time, and every shadow reminds us that power is just a moment between sunsets. The morning slowly penetrates into the red-hot silence, like a flame breaking through the sand. The world is no longer the same as it used to be. The greenery has given way to ochre, the swamp waters have disappeared, and instead there are dry plains where sparse trees pull burnt branches to the sky. Dust hangs in the air, and the light of the sun does not seem golden, but white, like a fire that does not warm, but only burns. The new masters of the planet, the therapsids, are moving in this merciless light. Their bodies are no longer as rough as those of the former lords, their skin is softer, their movements are more careful and flexible. They feel a different life, a different breath, not only survival, but also awareness of existence itself. On the rocky slope where the shores once were, an animal stands with a powerful chest and outstretched paws resting on the ground, not sideways, but straight, as if it is learning to stand like future animals. Its body is covered with short, sparse scales, and its head is heavy, but its shape has lines resembling the skulls of future beasts. This is a dimetrodont, a descendant of ancient paleozoics, but there is already something different in his look. He inhales the dry air and slowly turns his head to the wind, as if he senses the scent of an invisible enemy. Everything around him is motionless, and only a rare whirlwind raises clouds of dust. In this silence, you can hear how slowly, inexorably time passes. Others live among the cracks and rocks, smaller but no less significant. Their movements are precise, their steps are light. They hide in the shadows, waiting, listening to every sound. They already have something that their ancestors did not know: attention, concentration, the ability to observe. When they walk, the head is raised, the eyes carefully slide over the ground. These are new forms of life, creatures in which nature begins to look for other ways. Not strength, but sensitivity. Not greatness, but endurance. Their breathing is steady, and when the wind blows sand over the plain, they sink closer to the ground to hide. Not from fear, but from the realization that life now belongs to those who know how to wait. A hot stream of air passes over the plain. A haze trembles on the horizon, as if the earth itself is breathing. The sun rises higher, and the stones begin to crack from the heat. In these sounds there is a harbinger of disaster, a barely noticeable rhythm that every living creature already feels. The world is changing, and even the air seems different, drier, heavier. On some slopes, where there is still moisture, low bushes of ancient horsetails grow. Their shoots are brittle, and a pungent smell of dust and resin emanates from them. There, among the shadows, eggs are hiding, buried in the sand. New generations are waiting for the night to hatch in the cool, and this rhythm, the breathing of the night, the expectation of life, repeats itself like the pulse of the planet. When the sun declines, evening falls on the plain, but there is no more cold. The air just gets quieter, the light gets softer. Nocturnal hunters emerge from the cracks, small therapsids with pointed snouts and long tails. Their movements are fast and the stars are reflected in their eyes. They are following the tracks left by the day, and there is caution in their steps. They do not rush at their prey, but observe, evaluate, and choose the moment. Something new is emerging in this behavior. Reasonable caution, not instinct, but a premonition that in a world where survival requires sensitivity, the one who knows how to listen will win. By nightfall, a thin fog covers the plain. The stars seem to be close, as if they are hanging above the earth itself. Somewhere in the distance there is a dull sound, a paw on a stone, a short jerk, a splash of dust, and silence again. The world froze. There were only occasional breaths, the crackle of dry stalks and the faint rustle of sand. Therapsids sleep hidden in stone recesses, huddled together to keep warm. Their bodies move in time with the breathing of the earth. So the night passes, and with the first rays of the sun, a new day begins. Similar to yesterday, but still different, because each dawn brings a step of evolution, albeit imperceptible to the eyes. And somewhere beyond the mountains, in the shadows, the world is already preparing the next turn. New winds rise from the depths of the earth, carrying heat, sulphur, and ash. What is still breathing does not know that there is a great collapse ahead, when the air becomes poison and the water becomes bitterness. But for now, life lives, warms, grows, and under the starry sky of the ancient earth, its quiet breathing sounds, steady as the pulse of eternity. Silence stands over the plain like a harbinger of trouble. The air is still, the sky is dim, as if someone has erased the colour from it. The world is frozen, but in this stillness there is an anxious expectation, as if the earth itself is holding its breath before something inevitable. The dust no longer rises from the wind because there is almost no wind. Only occasional streams of hot air slowly creep across the ground, carrying the smell of sulphur and ash. This is the end of the Permian period, the last gasp of the ancient world, in which life, which seemed eternal, suddenly felt the limit of its breath. Smoke rises from cracks in the mountains where rivers once flowed. It is thick, oily, and stretches upward without wind, hiding the sun. Sometimes a dull rumble can be heard underground, as if giant hearts are beating in the bowels of the planet. The ground is shaking and the air is filled with burning. The first emissions of sulfur turn the horizon yellow, and the light becomes so dim that the day does not differ from the evening. Plants wither, their stems become charred, and their leaves curl into dry strands. Even those who are used to the heat are now hiding under rocks, in cracks, in the shade of extinct trees. The living recedes, leaving behind the smell of ashes. The plain where the therapsids once hunted is now empty. The bodies of the dead lie half covered with ashes. The air is acrid, it makes your eyes cloudy. The last surviving animals slowly wander across the cracked earth, not in search of food, but simply in motion, as if the very movement keeps them from oblivion. Their breathing is heavy and ragged. Every breath is a struggle, every step is a memory. In the distance, a black curtain of smoke rises. The earth has opened, releasing an abyss from its depths. Silence is replaced by a low rumble, and then by a flash. The light from the eruption turns the clouds a bloody cola. The plair the therapsids once hunted is now empty. The bodies of the dead lie half covered with ashes. The air is acrid. It makes your eyes cloudy. The last surviving animals slowly wander across the cracked earth, not in search of food, but simply in motion, as if the very movement keeps them from oblivion. Their breathing is heavy and ragged. Every breath is a struggle, every step is a memory. In the distance, a black curtain of smoke rises. The earth has opened, releasing an abyss from its depths. Silence is replaced by a low rumble, and then by a flash. The light from the eruption turns the clouds a bloody colour. Day and night are mixed. The sea that once nourished life has now become a poison. The waves are heavy, their surface is covered with a film reflecting the fire of the sky. The fish rise to the surface, gasp for air and die, turning belly up. The oceans darken, become saturated with sulfur and metals, and oxygen disappears in their depths. Dead silence reigns at the bottom, where nautiloids and trilobites once lived. Only rare bubbles rise from the depths, reminding of rotting. The air smells of sulfur dioxide and death. All living things that still stay on land feel this smell as a call to exodus. But the sea that once nourished life has now become a poison. The waves are heavy, their surface is covered with film reflecting the fire of the sky. The fish rise to the surface, gasp for air and die, turning belly up. The oceans darken, become saturated with sulfur and metals, and oxygen disappears in their depths. Dead silence reigns at the bottom, where nautiloids and trilobites once lived. Only rare bubbles rise from the depth, reminding of rotting. The air smells of sulfur dioxide and death. All living things that still stay on land feel this smell as a call to exodus. But there is nowhere to go. In the ashen twilight, a creature is moving on the plain, an emaciated therapsid, its sides sunken, its eyes cloudy, its rough skin covered with ash. He stops at a dried-up riverbed where there used to be water. The ground has cracked, and pieces of crystals can be seen in the cracks, sparkling under the dim light. He lowers his head, but there is no moisture, only warm dust. My strength is draining, my breath is thinning, and yet he raises his head to the sky, not out of desperation, but as if listening to a distant sound that has not yet been born, to the breath of a new time, which is still hidden behind smoke and death. It starts to rain in the evening, but it's not water, it's a hot mixture of ash and acids, slowly settling to the ground. Drops fall on the charred leaves, on the shells of the dead, leaving burn marks. It's getting darker by the hour. The sounds disappear. Even the insects, always restless, are now silent. The world seemed to have gone underground, leaving only traces of its past life on the surface. At night, the flames of volcanoes shine like stars, and smoke, thick and heavy, creeps between them. The breath of the age disappears in this smoke. When dawn finally comes, it doesn't bring any light. Just a grey chill penetrating to the bones. The ashes cover everything. Rocks, corpses, rare plants. The wind appears again, but it is already different. It does not carry warmth, but emptiness. The world is empty. Everything that breathed is now dissolving in memory. And only in the depths, under the thickness of the stone, in the hidden cracks, do the seeds of the future sleep. there is still a spark in them that will one day turn into a new life. For a long time there was darkness over the earth. It wasn't ni for a long time there was darkness over the earth. It wasn't night time. It was the darkness of ashes, the darkness of oblivion. The mountains were silent, the ocean slept under a heavy leaden sky, and the air, which had lost its breath, stood motionless as if waiting. Centuries have passed, but time seems to have lost its course here. The earth was cold, and life what was left lived deep under the stone, in cracks where residual heat still lingered. Here, in the underground voids, moisture dripped from the ceilings, and these drops became the beginning of a new era. Gradually the ashes settled. The clouds were thinning. The sun, dim at first, then brighter, reappeared in the sky. Its rays fell on frozen lava fields, on grey plains where there were no trees or grass left. But even here, in the lifeless silence, changes were taking place. Dark spots appeared on the rocks, colonies of lichens, the first harbingers of the return of life. They grew slowly, almost imperceptibly, but their presence was the beginning of a new breath of the planet. Moisture gathered in tiny cracks beneath them, and in this moisture spores awoke, ancient, surviving against all odds. On the plain where the giants used to rule, now there were only bones, white, fragile, covered with dust. The wind passed between them, making soft, almost musical sounds. Sometimes it seemed that the earth itself was singing a lullaby to a bygone world. But with this song came a new movement. Small creatures, barely visible to the eye, moved among the cracks, the simplest forms, the first to dare to come to the surface. Their bodies were soft, transparent, and where there was a desert yesterday, wet lowlands appeared in which water collected, the first ponds of a new era. Among these ponds, a tiny creature stirs, a descendant of those who survived the disaster, one of the few therapsids who survived in the cracks of the stone. His body is small, his skin is smooth, and his eyes are alert. He treads carefully on the damp ground, sniffing the air. The smells that were there before are no longer there. The world has become different, colder, quieter, but cleaner. He raises his muzzle to the sky, where for the first time in millennia the clear sun is shining, and the golden light of modern times is reflected in his gaze. He does not know that one day new, strong and fast ones will arise from his family, those who will conquer the planet again. But this moment is the beginning of their journey. By evening, silence descends over the earth again, but it's not dead silence. You can hear breathing in it, quiet even, like the rhythm of a heart that beats in the depths of the planet. The earth is full of life again, albeit in its infancy. The ashes no longer obscure the sky. The smell of dampness, freshness, and the first rain is in the air. The world is resting, healing, and slowly growing. Everything starts all over again. The sun was slowly rising over the plains, scattering thin rays over the molten rocks and grey sands that had been covered with ash yesterday. The world seemed frozen after the disaster, as if the planet itself had decided to take a short rest. The air was clearer than it had been in millions of years, but it still smelled of old smoke and dead leaves. Moisture appeared on the surface of the earth, weak, cold, drops gathered in cracks, glistened in the dim light, and life lurked in these drops. Where giant therapsids had once reigned, small, inconspicuous creatures that had survived among the rocks now crawled. Their movements are careful, their eyes are attentive, they are trying a new, unfamiliar breath of the world. The air is saturated with oxygen, but still mixed with remnants of sulfur and ash. These surviving creatures are fragile harbingers of future archosaurs. Their skin is softer, their movements are more precise, and there is something new in their gaze. Cautious curiosity, the awakening of the instinct of exploration. The first signs of a resurgence of flora have appeared on the horizon. The low horsetail bushes growing from the cracks were gradually covered with greenery. Lichens, which seemed too simple to live in, turned into dense carpets on the rocks. There was a whole symphony in this slow awakening of nature. The faint rustle of new shoots, the quiet dripping of moisture, the slight tremor of the air under the first breath of wind. Every sound and movement was a sign that the world was coming back to life, that the catastrophe was just a pause, not the end. Reservoirs began to appear on the recently cooled volcanic plains. Shallow puddles and channels collected water, feeding new plants and creating a microenvironment for the surviving organisms. Life was coming to life in these waters. Microscopic algae, tiny invertebrates, the first traces of new fish, still weak and small, but already adapted to the changed conditions. The water reflected the weak sun, and in this reflection there was a glimmer of the future, the bright prospect of new epochs. Small archosaurs, the ancestors of dinosaurs, slowly developed new planes. Their bodies were small, flexible, and had long tails to help them balance on solid ground. They moved carefully, choosing soft ground and avoiding sharp rocks. Every step is an attempt to survive in a world that has recently tried to destroy them. A new force has already begun to manifest itself inside them. The ability to react quickly to a threat, adapt to the environment, and unite for protection. The air is gradually warming, and a forest appears on the horizon. These are low trees, not yet familiar to humans, but already similar to the future ancestors of ferns and conifers. Their roots pierce the hard ground, collecting rare moisture. Small creatures, insects and spiders crawl between them, bringing movement back to a world that was empty until recently. The forest and the plain are two different worlds, but already interacting with each other. Light penetrates through sparse crowns, playing on rocks, on animal fur, on tiny ponds, creating a living mosaic. Clouds appear in the sky, sparse and transparent, and rain slowly begins to fall from them, the first after a long time. It is soft and cool, the drops fall to the ground and no longer burn it. Living creatures reach for the water, plants open their leaves, and the air is filled with the smell of damp earth and freshness. In every movement, in every breath, one feels that the catastrophe is behind them, that life is finding new ways and starting to build a future. In the evening, the plain is covered with a soft shadow. The sun sets below the horizon, turning the clouds golden and purple. Archosaurs gather in shelters, hiding the younger generation, and on the plain you can hear the soft rustle of new insects, the rustle of leaves, and the light movement of water and streams. There is the rhythm of a new life in this sound. The world is gradually recovering, but it is already different. Softer, more fragile, listening to every breath of the planet. And somewhere far away, among the forests and plains, the first signs appear that in millions of years giant dinosaurs will reign here. But now they are small, cautious, and do not yet know the strength they will gain. The world is quietly preparing for a new era, slowly and confidently, step by step, breathing fresh air and once again experiencing life in all its beauty and danger. The dawn of the next day illuminated the plain with a soft, diffused light. A thin haze of morning mist rose from the cracks in the ground, as if the planet itself was exhaling remnants of the past. The humid air was cool but fresh, and there was a smell of damp soil, the first young leaves, and light burning left over from surviving volcanic foci. Every movement of the light was reflected in tiny drops of moisture on the rocks and plants, creating a flickering kaleidoscope of shadows. In these shadows, small creatures moved, the ancestors of the future archosaurs, cautious and wary, trying out a new land. Low-growing shrubs stretched towards the sky, covered with fresh greenery, and raindrops stuck on their surface reflecting the pale light. The first insects were slowly crawling between them, stretching their bodies to keep warm under the sunlight. Their movements are careful, every step is thought out because the world has not yet regained its usual rhythm. Every day they became more confident, their bodies grew stronger, and their eyes adapted to the bright light and transparent atmosphere. It was a life that had survived and was now slowly reclaiming the world. The first signs of new reservoirs are appearing on the plain, small ponds filled with clean rainwater. Microscopic algae and protozoa begin to multiply in them. Their movement creates a light, barely audible murmur. Gusts of wind raise a thin layer of water and dust, and in this play of light and reflections, the rhythm of a new life is manifested. Tiny creatures appear on the surface of the water. Primitive fish, still weak and small, but already able to search for food and hide from predators. They are the first guardians of a new era, small but already armed with a survival instinct. Archosaurs slowly leave their hiding places, carefully making their way through the thickets. Their bodies are flexible and mobile, their tails serve as a balance, and their eyes carefully glide over the surface of the earth. Each movement is a cautious step into the unknown, checking the strength of new winds, soil temperature, and the presence of danger. Their cheekbones and jaws are not yet powerful, but the ability to grab and hold prey is already showing. In these small bodies, barely visible against the background of large plains, lies the future, from which land giants will arise in millions of years. The first reptiles of other genera are quietly moving between forests and plains, appearing in places where no large foot has yet set foot. They study the earth, the air, the water, and taste new plants and insects. There is caution in their behavior, but also curiosity. It's not just survival, it's exploring a new world in which every movement carries information and every discovery is a chance at life. The world is slowly filling with sounds, the rustle of leaves, the slight flutter of insects, the occasional splash of water in tiny ponds. During the day, the light changes the angle, colouring the earth in shades of gold and ochre. Archosaurs learn to navigate in space, avoid dangers, and move towards water sources. Sometimes at dusk there is a slight tremor of the earth, a faint reminder of past eruptions. The animals react instantly, hiding in shelters, but their movements are becoming more confident. This balance of caution and exploration reveals a new rhythm of life, a rhythm that will determine the evolution of the ancestors of dinosaurs. In the evening, the first clouds appear on the horizon, light and transparent. They colour the earth in soft grey-blue tones, and the wind brings coolness. Rain is still rare, but its appearance brings life-giving moisture. Every drip sound on dry land is perceived as a gift from nature. In these moments, small creatures, the ancestors of future giants, learn to exist in a world that has recovered from its demise, but is still full of threats. They are slowly exploring new territories, preparing for the future that they will have to create with their steps and breath. And in this calm, almost serene world, where the darkness of the past has been replaced by a soft light, the slow movement of time is felt. Every morning brings new opportunities, and every evening brings survival lessons. Archosaurs and their small relatives learn, grow, and adapt. They are the first sparks of a new era, and their presence promises that someday these plains will be inhabited by giants capable of ruling the world, once again transformed into a living space. With the first rays of a new day, forests and plains come to life in a new way. A light mist rises from the cracks of the earth, and each stream carries moisture into the roots of young plants. The greenery becomes brighter, more saturated, and the smell of moist soil mixes with the subtle aroma of fresh leaves and resin. In this world that has just emerged from the darkness of disaster, every drop of water, every rustle in the foliage is a sign of rebirth. The first channels appear on the horizon, reflecting light like silver threads, and small fish begin to appear in them, still weak but already confident in their movements. Archosaurs are cautiously exploring new territories. Their bodies are flexible, their tails serve as a balance, and their movements are precise. They carefully observe the air, listen to sounds, and monitor the movement of insects and other small animals. Every day is a step in a new world, slow and measured. Their jaws are not strong yet, but their grip is already strong enough to hold their prey. Inside their bodies, the structure of future giants is already manifesting itself: strength, endurance, and the ability to survive. The first signs of a complex ecosystem are appearing between the forest and the plain. Insect colonies live on mossy rocks, spiders crawl, and the first small vertebrates appear. Each creature occupies its own niche, and even the smallest ones play a role in restoring life. Light splashes of water in streams create quiet music, which is responded to by bird-like insects flitting over ponds. The world finds a rhythm. The breath of the earth becomes audible in every rustle and drop. The day gradually fills with light, which is reflected from wet leaves and stones. Archosaurs continue to move across the plains, carefully choosing their way to reservoirs in the shade of trees. Their eyes sparkle in the light, and their breathing is steady and slow. Sometimes they stop, listen, and learn to distinguish between smells and sounds, skills that will help them survive in the future. These small bodies already have the ability to analyze and survive in difficult conditions, and this is a harbinger of the greatness of their descendants. The water in the channels is slowly reviving. Fish begin to search for food, small invertebrates crawl along the bottom. Clouds are reflected on the surface, the wind stirs the leaves and raises a light dust. Every movement, Every drop is a lesson for living beings, the awakening of instincts, adaptation to a new world. The Earth, recently covered with ashes and dead bodies, is now slowly regaining its integrity, and life, which seemed almost destroyed, is becoming visible again. By evening, the sun sinks below the horizon, turning the sky golden and purple. The warm air stirs the foliage. The light rustle of animals is heard. The sounds of tiny inhabitants of the forest and the plains slowly return. Archosaurs gather in shelters, hiding their young and resting after a day full of careful exploration. The world is no longer the same as it was before the disaster. It is softer, but more fragile, and every being feels that life here requires care and patience. The night falls with a soft darkness, but there is movement in it, quiet and imperceptible. Only a light wind stirs the grass. The rustle of insects and the splash of water remind us that life goes on. There is a premonition of the future in this silence, when the plains and forests will become a kingdom of giants capable of ruling the world. But now they are small and cautious, not yet realizing the power they will one day possess. The world is breathing, and this breathing is getting stronger every day, bringing a new era closer. Dawn once again paints the plains in soft shades of gold and pink light. A light haze rises from the cracks of the earth, giving the surface a hazy, drowsy feeling. Every movement of the air, every flight of an insect seems like a new breath of a world that was recently covered with ashes. The water in the channels and small ponds reflects the light, creating flickering reflections on which tiny fish and insects move. This quiet rhythm of life is gradually becoming noticeable, slow but steady. Archosaurs are exploring new areas of the plains. Their movements are careful, but they are already confident. Flexible bodies, long tails and attentive eyes help them navigate. Every step is to check the surface, every detail of the landscape. Sometimes they stop and listen to the sounds of water, the rustle of leaves or the rustle of small animals. This world is not yet subdued, but those who know how to notice survive. And in these small bodies, the traits of future giants manifest themselves: endurance, caution, and the ability to adapt to changing conditions. New plants are appearing on the plains, low-growing trees, shrubs, and ferns. Their leaves are fresh, green, and covered with moisture. The leaves rustle in the light wind, and the dewdrops glisten in the morning light. Small creatures crawl among them, look for new food sources, learn to move, hide, and explore the world. These simple actions already show a survival strategy: caution, patience, and observation. The water in the ponds begins to be gradually enriched with microorganisms. Fish grow, learn to swim and seek food. Insects float on the surface and small invertebrates hide under the water. This slow process of restoring life sets the stage for a future complex ecosystem. The Earth, which seemed dead, gradually comes to life, and every movement, every sound reminds us that life is surprisingly resilient, capable of rebirth after death. During the day, the sun warms the plains, and archosaurs learn to use the new conditions. They move to water sources, check the freshness of the soil, and the presence of vegetation. Their jaws are already capable of holding prey, and their eyes adapt to the light. Gradually, collective behavior is manifested: protection of young animals, joint exploration of territories. These first signs of social interaction will become the foundation for future species that will rule the land millions of years from now. In the evening, the shadow of the forest and the plain lengthens. The air is getting cooler, and a light wind is stirring the leaves and grass. The noise of small animals becomes more noticeable: the crackling of insects, the rustling of small vertebrates, light splashes of water. Archosaurs gather in shelters, carefully sheltering their young and resting after a day full of research and observations. The world is slowly adopting a new rhythm that will define the lives of future giants. The night shrouds the earth in soft darkness, but it is no longer an empty silence. Breathing, rustling, and movement of water can be heard in it. Each being carefully acquires the habits of a new world, adapts to its rhythm. These quiet nighttime moments are a lesson in patience, caution, and survival. The earth is slowly coming to life, and in this rebirth you can feel the future, which will bring new species, new forms of life, new epochs. Early morning envelops the plains in a soft haze, and the world, which seemed empty and dead recently, comes to life again. A light wind stirs the wet grass and leaves of low-growing shrubs, creating a quiet, rhythmic melody. Tiny creatures who survived the disaster carefully leave their shelters, tasting the world, feeling the air and soil moisture. Their every step is careful, measured, but there is a sense of perseverance and a desire for life. Archosaurs explore new plains with cautious confidence. Their flexible bodies allow them to quickly maneuver between rocks, shrubs and cracks. Their tails serve as a balance, and their eyes carefully scan the space. They are learning to avoid dangers, find water and food, and are already showing signs of collective behaviour, protecting young animals and exploring the territory together. These are the first steps towards forming future communities from which large and powerful species will arise. The water in the channels and shallow ponds is gradually filled with life. Microscopic algae grow, invertebrates crawl along the bottom, small fish learn to swim, find food and avoid danger. The first insects begin to appear around ponds, which feed on plants and small organisms. A new ecosystem is slowly forming, in which every element takes its place, and even the smallest creature plays an important role in restoring life on the planet. The forest is gradually spreading across the plains. Low-growing trees and shrubs covered with fresh foliage create the first shadows where small animals hide. Ferns are attracted to the light. Their large leaves create a humid microclimate for the undergrowth. Life begins in these shadows, slowly, cautiously, but steadily. Every movement is a step towards the formation of complex communities that will one day become a home for future giants. During the day, the sun's light falls brightly on the ground, warming the plains and forests. Archosaurs use this time to explore, taste new plants and small animals, check water sources, and memorize safe shelters. Their jaws become stronger, their movements confident, and their behavior gradually acquires elements of strategy and observation. The world is once again becoming a place of life where every action is important. Every movement carries information about survival. In the evening, the plain turns into soft shades of sunset. The air is getting cooler, and the sounds of animals and insects fill the silence. Archosaurs gather in shelters, and small creatures hide in the grass and under the leaves. This evening is a lesson in slow adaptation, a reminder that life after a disaster requires patience and caution. The Earth is gradually adopting a new rhythm, and in this rhythm the future is already being felt, in which these little creatures will become the progenitors of new great forms of life. The night is falling, but it is no longer empty. You can hear the breathing of water, the rustling of leaves, the movements of small animals. In this quiet world there is a slow but steady rebirth of life. Every creature gradually learns to listen to the rhythm of the earth, to its breathing, and it is these moments that will become the foundation for future ecosystems where giants will once rule the land and forests. Dawn fills the plains with soft light, reflected in the first reservoirs of a new life. A light haze rises from the cracks and hollows, creating the feeling that the earth has just woken up. Every movement of the air, every flight of an insect, every rustle of water reminds us that the life that survived the disaster is gradually returning. Small archosaurs cautiously leave their shelters, carefully examining new spaces, studying the relief, soil moisture and vegetation location. Small fish and invertebrates fill the reservoirs. Their movements are barely noticeable, but they create microwaves on the surface of the water, reflecting the morning sun. Tiny insects move around the channels, collecting nutrients, swaying the grass and creating the first connections in a new ecosystem. Lichens and mosses appear on cracks and stones, giving the surface a green tint. All these are the first elements of future forests and plains, from which a complex world of new creatures will grow. Archosaurs explore the plains, learn to navigate the growing thickets. Their bodies are flexible and mobile, their tails balance when moving, and their eyes scan the space carefully. They seek water, food, and shelter, and gradually develop collective behavior, protecting young animals, exploring new areas together. These skills, slowly gaining ground, will become the foundation of the future social structures of their descendants, the giants who will one day own this land. The sun rises higher, and the vegetation comes to life. Ferns and shrubs open their leaves, creating shadows and a microclimate for the undergrowth. Small creatures live in the shade, insects, spiders, the first small vertebrates. Every movement is filled with care and attention. The first aquatic plants appear on the surface of the water, reflecting light, and creating a new environment for the inhabitants. The world is getting a rhythm again. The movement of water, the rustle of leaves, the rustle of small animals. During the day, archosaurs continue to explore new territories. They taste plants, observe small animals, and explore water sources. Their movements become more confident, their jaws become stronger, and their reactions to danger accelerate. Gradually, they learn to distinguish safe areas from dangerous ones, and the young ones follow the adults, absorbing the first lessons of survival. These observations and experiences form the foundation of new generations who will be stronger and more resilient. In the evening, the plain is coloured with soft shades of sunset. A light wind stirs the grass and leaves, and the sounds of nature become more intense. The rustle of insects splashing water, and the movements of small animals. Archosaurs gather in shelters, hiding their young, and slowly settle into a new world. The night brings silence, but it is no longer empty. You can hear the breathing of water, the movement of foliage, the light rustling of animals. This quiet rhythm is the foundation of a new order, slow, careful, but confident. Morning again shrouds the plains with a light mist. The sun's rays break through the haze, colouring the earth in soft shades of gold and green. A light wind stirs the grass, leaves of shrubs and low-growing trees, creating a quiet melody of a new world. Every movement of the air, every drop of dew is a sign that life is slowly recovering. Small archosaurs cautiously leave their shelters, testing the ground for strength, exploring vegetation, listening to every rustle. The water in the channels and small ponds comes to life. Fish swim slowly, pushing algae apart. Invertebrates crawl along the bottom, and insects land on the surface of the water. All this creates a quiet symphony of life. Small waves, light splashes, the rustle of wings and movements. Each creature learns to interact with its environment, adapting to new conditions. Even the smallest elements of the ecosystem play a role in restoring life, and every day brings new opportunities for survival. Archosaurs explore new territories of plains and forests. Their movements are precise, flexible, with balancing tails. They learn to find water, food sources, and shelters, as well as avoid potential hazards. Collective behaviour begins to manifest itself. Adults guard the young, explore the territory together, and learn to coordinate actions. These skills, slowly consolidating, will become the basis of the future social structures of their descendants. Vegetation on the plains and in the forests is gradually getting thicker. Ferns, shrubs, and low-growing trees create shade where small creatures hide. The leaves open in the sun, the dewdrops shine, reflecting the light and creating a light shimmering surface. The undergrowth is awakening under the forest. Insects, spiders, and small vertebrates crawl among the wet leaves, exploring new territories. All this forms a complex ecosystem in which each element interacts with others, creating harmony and sustainability. During the day, the sun warms the earth and water, plants and animals. Archosaurs use this time to learn and explore, tasting plants and insects, observing their environment, and memorizing safe paths. Their movements are becoming more confident, their reactions are faster. Gradually, they learn to distinguish between threats, avoid dangers, find food and water, and pass on knowledge to the young. This process of slow adaptation forms the foundation for future generations. In the evening, the plain turns into the warm shades of sunset. A light wind stirs the grass and leaves of the trees, creating soft music. The rustling of insects and small animals becomes more noticeable. Archosaurs gather in shelters, hiding their young and resting after a day of observation. The night falls into soft darkness, but it is no longer empty. You can hear the breathing of water, the movement of foliage, and the light rustle of animals. This rhythm is the foundation of a new life, slow, careful, but confident. There is a sense of the future in these quiet, almost imperceptible movements. Small archosaurs and other surviving creatures will eventually evolve into new species capable of exploring land and forests. The world is gradually gaining a rhythm, the breathing of which will become the foundation for the age of giants, when these plains will be inhabited by mighty dinosaurs. Early morning once again envelops the plains with a soft light. The fog is slowly clearing, and the world is becoming clear. The sun's rays play on the moist foliage of shrubs, stunted trees and ferns, reflecting in small ponds and streams. Every movement of the water, every insect flight, every rustle of the grass is the quiet breathing of a new world that is gradually recovering from death. Small archosaurs cautiously explore the space, taste the soil, and look for shelter and food sources. The water in ponds and streams is filled with life. Fish, still weak, learn to navigate, avoid danger, and forage for food. Invertebrates crawl along the bottom and among algae, and insects take a closer look at the water and its inhabitants. Each element of the ecosystem begins to interact with others, creating a subtle but steady rhythm. Slowly, step by step, life returns to the plains, filling them with sounds, movements, and breathing. Archosaurs explore new forest areas. Their movements are flexible and precise, and their tails balance when maneuvering between trees and bushes. His eyes are carefully watching the space, and his breathing is even. Inside these bodies, an understanding of the world is emerging, the experience of which is passed on to the young: where to find food, how to avoid dangers, how to use shelters. Collective behaviour begins to take shape, which over time will become the basis for more complex social structures. The forests are gradually getting thicker. Ferns and stunted trees create shadows where small creatures hide. Mosses and lichens cover the rocks and roots, creating a microclimate for the undergrowth. Insects, spiders, and small vertebrates inhabit these spaces, slowly forming a stable ecosystem. Each creature learns to interact with its environment, adapt, survive, and find new opportunities. During the day, the sun warms the soil, water, and leaves. Archosaurs use this time to explore new areas of plains and forests. Their movements become confident, their reactions quick, and their jaws grow stronger. They learn to distinguish between threats, choose safe paths, protect young animals, and look for new food sources. This gradual process of learning and adaptation forms the foundation for future generations who will explore the land and forests with greater strength and confidence. In the evening, the plains and forests turn into soft shades of sunset. A light wind stirs the leaves and grass, creating a soft melody. The rustling of small animals and insects becomes more noticeable. Archosaurs gather in shelters, hiding their young and resting after a day of observation. The night falls into soft darkness, but it is no longer empty. You can hear the breathing of water, the movement of leaves, the quiet rustling of animals. It is a slow, steady breathing of life that gradually restores the balance of the new world. And in this world, full of careful movements and quiet sounds, the future is revealed. The small archosaurs that survived the disaster will gradually gain the strength and skills that will allow their descendants to rule the plains and forests. The world is slowly finding a rhythm that will become the foundation for the future age of giants, an era when these lands will once again be full of movement, life, and strength. Morning once again fills the plains with soft light, reflected in the first reservoirs, channels, and dewdrops on the foliage. A light wind ruffles the grass, leaves of shrubs and low-growing trees creating a quiet, rhythmic sound. Every movement of the air, every movement of insects and small vertebrates is the breath of a new world that has just awakened after a long period of silence. Small archosaurs cautiously leave their shelters, taste the soil and vegetation, listen to every sound, and explore new hiding places for their young. The water in ponds and streams continues to revive. Fish swim slowly, exploring new territories and food resources. Invertebrates crawl along the bottom and algae, and insects explore the surface of the water. All this creates a subtle but steady rhythm of life. Small creatures learn to interact with each other and the environment, forming new interconnections and stable microcommunities on which a more complex ecosystem is gradually being built. Archosaurs explore forest areas. Their movements are precise and flexible. Their tails help to keep their balance, and their eyes carefully scan the space. Inside these bodies, the skills of orientation, finding food and water, and protecting young animals are formed. Collective behaviour begins to become noticeable, joint exploration of the territory, monitoring of dangers and coordination of actions. These first manifestations of the social structure will become the foundation for future generations, who will have the strength and strategy necessary to survive on the plains and in the forests. The forests are gradually getting thicker. Ferns and shrubs create shadows for the undergrowth, which is home to insects, spiders, and small vertebrates. Mosses and lichens cover rocks and tree roots, creating a microclimate for new forms of life. In these shadows, among moist foliage and soft soil, a stable community is emerging. Every movement, every rustle, every breath is a step towards the formation of a complex and sustainable ecosystem. During the day, the sun warms the earth, water and tree leaves. Archosaurs use this time to search for food, explore new areas, and train their young. Their movements become more confident, their reactions become faster, and their jaws become stronger. Gradually, they learn to distinguish safe places from dangerous ones, coordinate actions, and protect the younger generation. This process of slow development and learning forms the foundation of future generations that will eventually become the dominant creatures on these plains. In the evening, the plains turn into soft shades of sunset. A light wind stirs the leaves and grass, creating soft music. The rustling of small animals and insects becomes more noticeable. Archosaurs gather in shelters, hiding their young and resting after a day of research. The night is falling, but it is no longer empty. You can hear the breathing of water, the rustle of foliage, and the quiet movements of small animals. This rhythm is the foundation of a new life, slow, careful, but confident. The future is revealed in these quiet movements and sounds. The minor archosaurs and the surviving creatures will gradually acquire the skills and strength their descendants need to master the plains and forests. The world is slowly adopting a new rhythm, which will become the foundation of the future age of giants, when these lands will once again be full of movement, life, and strength. Early morning again envelops the plains in a soft haze through which the first rays of the sun break through. A light wind stirs the grass, leaves of shrubs and low-growing trees, creating a quiet, rhythmic melody of a new world. Every movement of the air, every insect flight, every rustle of water and foliage is the breath of a planet that has just awakened after a long period of silence. Small archosaurs cautiously leave their shelters, exploring the surrounding space, listening to the rustle of grass, dewdrops and slight fluctuations in the air. The water in ponds and channels becomes the scene of the first interactions. Fish swim slowly, exploring food, resources, and safe places. Invertebrates crawl along the bottom and algae, and insects carefully touch the surface of the water. All this creates a subtle but steady rhythm of life, in which every movement and every being plays an important role. Small archosaurs observe, learn, and adapt, developing the survival skills and caution necessary for future generations. Archosaurs explore forest and lowland areas. Their flexible bodies easily maneuver between bushes, trees, and rocks. The tails help to maintain balance, the eyes closely monitor the space, and the movements are precise. They learn to find food, water, safe shelters, and protect their young. Collective behavior becomes noticeable. Joint exploration of the territory, coordination of actions, and mutual protection. These skills will become the foundation for future generations who will explore the world with greater strength and strategy. The forests are gradually getting thicker, creating shade and a microclimate for the undergrowth. Ferns, low-growing trees, and shrubs provide shelter for insects, spiders, and small vertebrates. Mosses and lichens cover rocks and tree roots, creating a moist, life-rich environment. Every movement, every rustle, and every breath is a step towards the formation of a complex and sustainable ecosystem where every organism matters. During the day, the sun warms the earth, water, and leaves, promoting vegetation growth and animal activity. Archosaurs continue to explore the territory, sampling plants, observing small animals, and developing skills in finding food and protecting young animals. Their movements become more confident, their reactions become faster, and their jaws become stronger. These little creatures are gradually forming a base for future generations who will become stronger and more resilient, master the plains and forests, and be able to survive in new conditions. In the evening, the plains turn into the warm shades of sunset. The wind stirs the leaves and grass, creating quiet, harmonious music. The rustling of small animals and insects becomes more noticeable. Archosaurs gather in shelters, hiding their young and resting after a day of observation and research. The night shrouds the earth in soft darkness, but it is no longer empty. You can hear the breathing of water, the movement of foliage, and the light rustling of animals. This rhythm is the foundation of a new life, slow, careful, but confident. And in this world full of quiet movements, slow breathing, and careful exploration, the future is emerging. The minor archosaurs and the surviving creatures will gradually gain the strength and skills their descendants need to one day rule the plains, forests, and all the spaces of this reborn planet. The world is slowly gaining a new rhythm, which will become the foundation for the future era of giants, the era of movement, life, and strength. The sun was barely touching the horizon when the plains were filled with soft light again. The fog slowly dissipated, leaving behind a moist and fresh air. The earth, which had recently been subjected to devastating catastrophes, was gradually reviving. Young shoots of ferns and shrubs were breaking through cracks in the soil, mosses and lichens were spreading on rocks and tree roots, and small channels and ponds filled with clear rainwater were enlivened by tiny invertebrates and the first fish. All this created the feeling of a slow but steady rebirth of life, in which every sound and every movement gained meaning. Small archosaurs cautiously left their hiding places, exploring new areas of plains and forests. Their flexible bodies made it easy to maneuver among rocks and bushes, and their tails served as a balance. His eyes scanned the space, and his breathing was steady and slow. Every step was weighed, every move was meaningful. Where the water was clear, where the ground was softer, where the shelter would be safe. The youngsters followed the adults, absorbing every action, every decision, every sound of the world they now had to live in. In the reservoirs, life slowly increased in intensity. The fish, still weak and cautious, gradually explored the open spaces, avoiding dangers, learning to eat and use water shelters. Invertebrates crawled along the bottom, and insects moved on the surface of the water, which barely touched the mirrored surface, creating light rippling circles. Every movement was significant. Every collision or fluctuation of the water left a mark on this newly restored ecosystem. The plains became more and more diverse. Ferns and shrubs reached out to the light, creating shadows in which small vertebrates and insects hid. A light wind stirred the grass, leaves, and mosses, creating a quiet, rhythmic melody. New micro-communities were forming in these shadows and on the wet ground. Each organism occupied its own niche. Each cell interacted with the environment. These early interactions created the foundation for future complex ecosystems that would become home to giants in millions of years. Archosaurs were slowly developing new territories. Their movements became more confident, their jaws tightened, and their reactions accelerated. They learned to distinguish between safe areas and dangerous zones, avoid predators and look for food, and coordinate actions to protect young animals. Gradually, collective behavior manifested itself: joint exploration of the area, observation of dangers, and support for each other in search of water and food. These skills, gaining ground, became the foundation of future generations who would become dominant creatures on the plains and in the forests. The forests, slowly expanding across the plains, created a dense microclimate. Ferns, shrubs, and low-growing trees provided shade and moisture, where insects, spiders, and small vertebrates lived. Mosses and lichens covered rocks, roots, and cracks, forming a soft base for the undergrowth. In these shadows, among moist leaves and soft soil, life was born. A network of relationships between organisms was formed, where every part of the ecosystem mattered. During the day, the sun's light warmed the plains and forests, increasing the activity of plants and animals. Archosaurs used this time to search for food, explore new areas, and consolidate the skills of their young. Their movements became more confident, their reactions became fast, and their jaws became strong. Small archosaurs observed small animals and insects, studying their habits, repeating the actions of adults, gradually developing survival skills and strategies necessary for mastering the environment. The water in the ponds and channels became saturated with life. Fish learned to move in open spaces, invertebrates mastered new layers of reservoirs, and insects created the first interactions with plants and other animals. Every movement, every drop of water, every rustle in the undergrowth was a lesson for the surviving creatures, slowly forming a rhythm of life that would be the foundation for future generations. By evening, the plains were tinged with the soft hues of sunset. The light wind stirred the leaves of the trees and the grass, creating a soft melody. The rustling of small animals and insects became more noticeable. Archosaurs gathered in shelters, hiding their young and resting after a long day of research and observation. The night was falling in soft darkness, but it was no longer empty. You could hear the breathing of water, the movement of foliage, the light rustling of animals. This rhythm of life became the basis of a new ecosystem, slow, cautious, but confident. As time passed, the plains and forests became more diverse. The first large predators appeared, which began to establish a hierarchy, and plants developed into new forms, creating dense forests and swampy lands. Small archosaurs gradually got used to the neighborhood with larger predators, learned to avoid danger and adapt to new conditions. The emergence of new life forms increased competition for resources, which forced all inhabitants of the plains and forests to develop a survival strategy. The rustle of leaves, the splash of water, and the quiet movements of animals have become a new rhythm of life. In every breath, in every movement, there was a sense of caution, perseverance and endurance necessary for survival. The world gradually acquired a steady rhythm, in which each ecosystem and each organism took its place, and the interactions between them became more and more complex. In the evening, the sunset coloured the world in purple and gold hues, and the forests and plains seemed to breathe in one breath. Archosaurs and other creatures gathered for the night, monitoring the safety of the territory and protecting the young. The rustling of small animals and insects filled the silence of the night. The water in the channels reflected the faint light of the moon, and the wind gently stirred the leaves. All this created a sense of harmony and stability in the new world, and the future was already felt in this harmony. The world was slowly preparing for the next phase of evolution, when small archosaurs and surviving creatures would become the basis for future giants who would rule the plains, forests, and all corners of the planet. Every morning brought new opportunities, every evening lessons in survival, and the night preserved the breath of life, which will never die, but will strengthen with each generation. With the first rays of dawn, the plains and forest came alive with a special light. A light mist rose over the marshy areas, covering the grass and ferns with a moist haze through which the sun's rays barely penetrated. The earth, which had recently gone through periods of death and recovery, was breathing again. Every movement of the air, the slight vibration of the leaves, the whisper of water in the channels and small streams created an invisible symphony of life. Small archosaurs cautiously left their shelters, stepping on soft soil, examining the territory, listening to the rustling of grass and insects. In the reservoirs and channels, life gradually intensified. The fish moved slowly across the water surface, picking up food and avoiding dangers. Invertebrates crawled among the algae, and at the bottom of ponds, and insects gently touched the surface of the water, creating light rippling circles. All this formed a stable but fragile rhythm of life, which was just beginning to stabilize after a recent recovery. Every movement, every drop of water mattered. The foundations of future ecosystems were being formed here. The plains were covered with vegetation, which gradually became more complex. Ferns stretched out to the light. Shrubs and stunted trees created shadows where small vertebrates and insects hid. The wind stirred the grass and foliage, creating quiet, rhythmic music, and dewdrops glistened on the leaves and stems. In these shadows, the first stable micro-communities were formed, where each organism took its place, and the interaction between them laid the foundation for future complex ecosystems. Archosaurs slowly developed forest and lowland areas. Their movements became more confident, their jaws tightened, and their reactions accelerated. They learned to distinguish between safe and dangerous places, coordinate actions, and protect young animals. Inside these small creatures, skills were being formed that, through generations, would turn into a survival strategy for large and strong descendants. Collective behavior was beginning to show. Joint exploration of the territory, monitoring of threats, caution and attention to each member of the group. By the middle of the day, the sun had warmed up the earth, leaves and water, increasing the activity of plants and animals. Ferns and shrubs opened their leaves, creating shade and a microclimate for the undergrowth, where spiders, insects, and small vertebrates lived. The water in the channels reflected sunlight, and the movement of fish and insects created a constant rhythm. The archosaurs used this time to train their young, explore new sites, and test food and water sources. The first signs of new predators began to appear on the plains. Their movements were stealthy, cautious, but sufficient to overwhelm the weak or unprepared inhabitants of forests and ponds. These predators were not giants, but their appearance increased the competition for resources. Small archosaurs learned to avoid these threats by noticing the details of potential enemies' behavior and mastering new survival strategies. Vegetation became more complex. Taller trees appeared, creating dense forests and swampy areas where it became easier to hide, but also closer to danger. By evening, the plains were tinged with shades of purple and golden light. A light wind stirred the grass and leaves, creating a soft melody. The rustling of insects and small animals became more noticeable. Archosaurs gathered in shelters, hiding their young and resting after a day of exploring the territory. The night was falling in soft darkness, but it was no longer empty. You could hear the breathing of water, the rustle of leaves, and the movements of animals. All this created a sense of harmony and stability in a new world in which survival required caution, patience, and observation. As night approached, the first shadows of large predators began to appear on the horizon, whose movements were slow but noticeable. Their presence increased the tension in the ecosystem, forcing small inhabitants to change their habits, seek shelter, and change their routes of movement. This was a harbinger of a future struggle for territory and resources, but still mild, observed and studied by all participants in the new world. The forest and the plains had their own slow rhythm. Every movement was significant. Every sound was a warning, a lesson, or an invitation to the careful game of life. The small archosaurs gradually understood the balance of power, adapted to new conditions, and strengthened their survival skills and ability to interact with the environment. The world was still young, but it was already showing signs of resilience and future dynamics, where new predators and herbivores would actively compete and form complex ecosystem structures. The night completely enveloped the plains and the world froze in quiet harmony. There was a sense of the future in that breath, in those careful rustles and movements. The world was gradually preparing for a new phase of evolution, when larger and stronger creatures would take their place, and the balance between predators and herbivores would become a crucial factor in survival. Every morning brought new opportunities, every evening lessons in patience and caution, and the night preserved the breath of life that would strengthen with each generation. Dawn once again enveloped the plains and forests with a soft light. Fog rose from swampy areas and lowlands, hiding the ground under a moist cover through which the first rays of the sun penetrated. A light wind stirred the grass, foliage of shrubs and low-growing trees, creating a quiet, rhythmic melody. The earth, filled with life, was no longer the same. The ecosystem became more complex, more saturated, where every sound, every movement mattered. Small archosaurs cautiously left their hiding places, exploring the territory and listening for every rustle. In the reservoirs, life intensified. The fish, already more confident in their movements, swam through the open water, avoiding dangers and predators looking for food. Invertebrates and insects moved across the water surface and under the aquatic vegetation, creating a subtle rhythm that was felt by all the inhabitants. Every movement, every splash or ripple on the surface of the water meant a potential threat or food. Small archosaurs learned to observe, anticipate, and react, absorbing survival lessons from the smallest details of the world around them. The plains and forests became more and more dense. Ferns stretched out to the light, shrubs created dense shadows, trees rose higher, forming thickets. Small vertebrates, insects and spiders hid in these shadows. Mosses and lichens covered the rocks and roots, creating a moist base for the undergrowth. Every corner was filled with life, and every movement was part of the slow symphony of the world, in which survival depended on attentiveness and caution. Archosaurs explored new areas of plains and forests with cautious confidence. Their movements became more and more precise, their tails helped to keep their balance, and their eyes carefully followed the space. They learned to distinguish safe places from dangerous ones, find shelters and water, and protect young animals. Collective behavior manifested itself more and more clearly. Joint exploration of the territory, monitoring of threats, coordination of actions. These skills gradually became the foundation for future generations who would be able to compete with new predators. Gradually, the first large predators appeared on the horizon. Their movements were stealthy, but strong enough for any small vertebrate or archosaur to sense danger. These predators not only increased competition for resources, but also forced smaller inhabitants to change habits, look for new ways and shelters. The lesser archosaurs watched them more closely, studying their movement routes and behaviour so as not to fall into a trap. During the day, the sun shone brightly on the plains and forests, activating plants and animals. The ferns opened their leaves, creating shade and a humid microclimate for the undergrowth. The water in the ponds and channels shimmered, reflecting the sun's rays. The movement of fish and insects created a constant rhythm. Lesser archosaurs learned to hunt small animals, explore new territories, and avoid predators. Their survival skills gradually became more complex, and observations of the behaviour of large predators formed new strategies. Plains and forests increasingly resembled dynamic ecosystems. The first social groups of predators appeared, hunting became collective, and herbivore strategies gradually became more complex. Competition intensified, creating an invisible network of interactions. Who is looking for food where? Who is watching whom? Which areas are safe for rest and feeding? Small archosaurs and other inhabitants learned to navigate these changing conditions while maintaining caution, attention, and patience. In the evening, the plains turned purple and gold. A light wind stirred the grass and leaves, creating soft music. The rustling of insects and small animals became more noticeable. Small archosaurs gathered in shelters, hiding their young, resting after a long day. The night enveloped the world in soft darkness, but it was no longer empty. The breathing of water, the movement of foliage, and the quiet rustling of animals created a sense of harmony and stability. The world taught us to survive, observe, and adapt. As night approached, the large predators became more active. Their silhouettes glided between the trees and shrubs, reminding all the inhabitants of the existence of competition and threat. Small archosaurs and other creatures have learned to avoid open spaces, seek shelter, and listen for every sound. It was a time of skill testing, observation, and careful survival. Forests and plains had their own rhythm. Every sound, every movement mattered, every blade of grass, every leaf affected the balance. Small archosaurs gradually mastered new survival strategies, observed social groups of predators, learned to avoid danger and use vegetation for protection. The world was becoming more complex and dynamic, but every day gave lessons in patience, caution, and observation. The night was filled with rustling, splashing water and the breath of life. The small archosaurs that survived the competition consolidated skills that would become part of their descendants' legacy through the generations. Every day brought new opportunities, every evening new lessons, and the night preserved the breath of life, strengthening the foundation for future generations and preparing the world for the next phase of evolution, where the forces of predators and herbivores will be even more comparable and intense. Early morning once again enveloped the plains in a soft light. A light mist rose over the lowlands and marshy areas, hiding the ground under a moist cover through which the first rays of the sun penetrated. A light wind stirred the grass, leaves of shrubs and low-growing trees, creating a quiet melody of the awakening world. The earth was filled with life and movement. Every sound, every movement mattered, and attentiveness and caution became essential qualities for survival. Small archosaurs cautiously left their shelters, exploring the plains and forests. Their movements were precise, their tails served as a balance, and their eyes kept a close eye on space. Every step was thought out, where the water was clean, where the ground was softer, where the shelter would be safe. The youngsters followed the adults, absorbing every sound, every movement, and every decision. The world required observation, patience, and caution. The water in the ponds and channels was reviving more and more intensively. Fish swam more confidently, avoiding dangers, and invertebrates moved through the aquatic vegetation and bottom. The insects touched the surface of the water, creating light rippling circles. Every movement was part of the subtle rhythm of life that was felt by all the inhabitants. Small archosaurs learned to anticipate events, notice the smallest details and use them to their advantage. The vegetation of the plains became more complicated. Ferns stretched out to the light, shrubs created a dense shadow, trees rose higher, forming dense thickets. Small vertebrates, insects, and spiders hid in these shadows, while mosses and lichens covered rocks and tree roots, creating a moist base of undergrowth. Every corner was filled with life, and every sound or movement signaled caution, stealth, or surveillance. Archosaurs slowly explored new areas, exploring the plains and forests. Their movements became more confident, their reactions became faster, and their jaws became stronger. They learned to distinguish safe areas from dangerous ones, find shelters and water, and protect young animals. Collective behavior manifested itself more and more clearly: joint exploration of the territory, monitoring of threats, coordination of actions. These skills became the foundation for future generations, who would eventually be able to withstand the pressure of larger and more dangerous predators. The first silhouettes of really large predators began to appear on the horizon. Their movements were slow but powerful. Each step felt like a warning. These new predators didn't just increase competition for resources, they changed the balance of the entire ecosystem. Small archosaurs, other small vertebrates, and even medium-sized predators had to adapt, study the movement routes and behavior of these giants, and look for new strategies for survival and shelter. During the day, the sun shone brightly on the plains and forests, increasing the activity of plants and animals. Ferns and shrubs opened their leaves, creating shade and a microclimate for the undergrowth. The water in the ponds shimmered, reflecting the light, and the movement of fish and insects created a constant rhythm. Small archosaurs learned to hunt small animals, observe the actions of large predators, and look for safe paths and shelters. Their strategies became more complex and their survival skills became more sophisticated. Over time, large predators began to form the first social groups. Joint hunting, territory allocation, and resource control created an invisible but tangible web of dominance. Small archosaurs and other inhabitants of forests and plains observed, learned to avoid danger, use vegetation for protection, and look for safe reservoirs. The competition was getting more intense, but it was still subtle, observable, and adaptable. By evening, the plains were turning purple and gold. A light wind stirred the grass and leaves, creating a soft melody. The rustling of small animals and insects became more noticeable. Archosaurs gathered in shelters, hiding their young and resting after a long day of observation and research. The night enveloped the world in soft darkness, but it was no longer empty. The breathing of water, the movement of foliage, and the quiet rustling of animals created a sense of harmony and stability. The night also brought danger. Large predators became more active, their silhouettes glided between trees and shrubs, forcing small and medium-sized inhabitants to change routes and seek shelter. The small archosaurs adapted to this new rhythm. They hid, observed, studied, and memorized. Every move was a lesson. Every night was a simulator for future caution and endurance. The plains and forests had their own slow but intense rhythm. Every sound, every movement mattered, every blade of grass, every leaf influenced the balance of power. Small archosaurs gradually mastered new survival strategies, observed social groups of predators, and learned to use vegetation and landscape for protection. The world was becoming more complex and dynamic, but every day gave lessons in patience, caution, and observation. And in this harmony and tension, the future was felt. The world was preparing for a new phase of evolution, when strength, size, and strategy would determine survival, and the balance between predators and herbivores would become key. Every day brought new opportunities, every evening brought survival lessons, and the night preserved the breath of life that would strengthen with each generation. Early morning shrouded the plains in a soft light. Fog rose from the swampy areas, covering the ground with a moist blanket. The sun's rays barely penetrated through the haze, illuminating the dew on the leaves of ferns and shrubs, the glitter of water in ponds and channels. A light wind stirred the grass, tree leaves and moss, creating a quiet melody of the awakening world. The earth, saturated with life, was no longer the same. Ecosystems became more complex, saturated, where every movement, every sound mattered. Small archosaurs cautiously left their hiding places, exploring the plains and forests, listening to every rustle, watching the shadows and silhouettes that glided among the vegetation. The water spaces were filled with life. Fish swam slowly, avoiding dangers and picking up food. Invertebrates moved through the aquatic vegetation and bottom, and insects barely touched the surface of the water, creating ripples and quiet circles. Every movement became part of the general rhythm of life, which was felt by all the inhabitants. Small archosaurs learned to anticipate events, notice the slightest changes in the environment, use them to their advantage and avoid potential threats. The plains were gradually becoming more complex with vegetation. Ferns stretched out to the light, shrubs created a dense shadow, trees rose higher, forming dense thickets in which small vertebrates and insects hid. Mosses and lichens covered rocks, roots, and cracks, creating a moist base for the undergrowth. Every corner was filled with life, and every movement, every sound was a signal for caution, stealth, or surveillance. Archosaurs were slowly developing new areas. Their movements became precise, their reactions faster, their jaws tighter. They learned to distinguish safe places from dangerous ones, find shelters and water, and protect young animals. Collective behavior was more pronounced. Joint exploration of the territory, threat monitoring, and coordination of actions. These skills became the foundation for future generations, who would be able to withstand the pressure of large predators and adapt to new conditions. From the middle of the day, new giant herbivores began to appear on the plains. Their movements were slow but powerful, each foot leaving a deep footprint in the moist soil. These creatures were changing the balance of the ecosystem. They tore down plants, trampled undergrowth, trampled paths through dense thickets. Lesser archosaurs and other inhabitants of forests and plains watched them, adapting to new threats and changing their usual routes. Vegetation has adapted to the presence of giants. Stronger and taller plants rose higher, forming dense forests and swampy areas, creating shade and shelters. Insects, spiders, and small vertebrates hid in these dense forests, while mosses and lichens covered rocks and roots, creating a soft base of undergrowth. The world gradually became more complex and multi-layered, where each organism took its place. Large predators reacted to the appearance of giants. Their movements became cautious, observant, and they built new hunting routes and interaction groups. Social ties between predators strengthened. Hunting strategies became more complex. Small archosaurs learned to avoid dangers and at the same time use vegetation for protection and camouflage. The ecosystem became the arena of a complex game in which survival depended on observation, caution, and the ability to use the possibilities of the environment. During the day, the sun shone brightly on the plains and forests, increasing the activity of all inhabitants. Fish and invertebrates moved in the ponds, insects explored the surface and plants. Small archosaurs learned to hunt small animals, observe the behavior of predators and giants, and look for safe paths and shelters. Their strategies became more complex and their survival skills more sophisticated, forming a foundation for future generations. By evening, the plains were turning golden and purple. A light wind stirred the grass and leaves of the trees, creating a soft melody. The rustling of small animals and insects became more noticeable. Small archosaurs gathered in shelters, hiding their young and resting after a long day of observation. The night enveloped the world in soft darkness, but it was no longer empty. The breathing of water, the rustle of foliage, and the quiet movements of animals created a sense of harmony and stability. The night also brought tension. Giant herbivores, though slow, caused changes in predator routes, forcing them to adjust hunting and social connections. Small archosaurs adapted to this rhythm. They hid, observed, and memorized the routes and behavioral patterns of all the large inhabitants of the plains. Every move was a lesson. Every night was a training of patience, caution, and observation. Forests and plains had their own complex rhythm. Every sound, every movement mattered. Every blade of grass, every leaf influenced the balance of power. Small archosaurs mastered new strategies, observed social groups of predators and giant herbivores, and learned to use vegetation and terrain for protection. The world was becoming more complex and dynamic, but every day brought lessons in patience, caution, and observation. And there was a sense of the future in this harmony, tension, and caution. The world was preparing for a new phase of evolution, where the balance between predators and giant herbivores would become a key factor in survival. Every day opened up new opportunities. Every evening there were lessons in caution, and the night preserved the breath of life, strengthening the foundation for future generations and forming the first complex ecosystems of the late Paleozoic. Early morning enveloped the plains and forests in a light haze. Fog rose over swampy areas and lowlands, hiding the ground under a moist cover through which the first rays of the sun penetrated. A light wind stirred the grass, foliage of shrubs and trees, creating a quiet, rhythmic melody of the awakening world. The earth breathed life, but there was an unusual heaviness in the air, a slight dampness, a rich smell of earth after rain, a harbinger of changes that were already beginning to affect the plains and forests. The small archosaurs cautiously left their hiding places. Their movements were precise, their tails served as a balance, and their eyes kept a close eye on space. Every step was thought out, where the water was clean, where the ground was softer, where the shelter was safe. The youngsters followed the adults, absorbing every sound, every movement, and every decision. The world required observation, patience, and caution as climate change began to affect vegetation, bodies of water, and the behavior of other animals. In the reservoirs, the water began to turn slightly cloudy. Fish moved cautiously, invertebrates hid under vegetation and rocks, insects touched the surface of the water with caution. Every movement meant a signal to the observers, a harbinger of changes in water levels, increased currents, and the emergence of new threats. Small archosaurs learned to anticipate these changes, to study the slightest signs of water movement and the reactions of the inhabitants of reservoirs. Plains and forests became more complex under the influence of climate change. Ferns stretched out to the light, shrubs and trees formed dense thickets, and mosses and lichens covered rocks and roots. But in areas where the ground became drier or wetter, plants changed their growth, and some species began to wither, leaving open spaces. Under these conditions, small vertebrates, insects and spiders sought new shelters, adapted to the changes, and explored new trails and feeding grounds. Archosaurs explored new areas, carefully observing vegetation, soil conditions, and reservoirs. Their movements became more precise, their reactions faster, and their jaws tightened. They learned to distinguish between areas affected by drought or floods, find safe paths and water, and protect young animals. Collective behavior was even more pronounced: joint exploration of the territory, risk assessment and coordination of actions. These skills were essential for survival in an unstable climate. From the middle of the day, light rain began to fall on the plains and forests. The drops pattered on the leaves of the ferns, creating a soft rhythm splashing in the channels and ponds. The water filled the cracks and depressions, washing away the topsoil and changing the habitual routes of the inhabitants. Fish and invertebrates moved to deeper areas. Insects sought protection on leaves, and small archosaurs explored new shelters and new routes, adapting to the changed environment. The appearance of rain attracted the attention of large herbivores. They moved slowly, trampling plants and shrubs, leaving trails behind them and trampling the undergrowth. Lesser archosaurs and other forest dwellers watched them, using vegetation for cover and camouflage. The social groups of predators also reacted to the changes. They adjusted hunting routes and interactions among themselves, building new strategies for food extraction. By evening, the rain had subsided, and the plains were turning golden pink. The wind stirred the leaves and grass, creating a soft melody. The rustling of small animals and insects became more noticeable. Archosaurs gathered in shelters, hiding their young and resting after a day of observation. The night enveloped the world in soft darkness, but it was no longer empty. The breathing of water, the movement of foliage, and the quiet rustling of animals created a sense of harmony and stability, despite climate change. The night also brought tension. Giant herbivores and large predators adjusted their routes, forcing small and medium-sized inhabitants to adapt. Small archosaurs listened to the noises, observed, and memorized the ways and behaviors of large creatures. Every move was a lesson. Every night was a training of patience, caution, and observation. The plains and forests had their own complex rhythm. Every sound, every movement mattered. Every blade of grass, every leaf influenced the balance of power. Small archosaurs mastered new strategies, observed social groups of predators and giant herbivores, and learned to use vegetation and terrain for protection. The world was becoming more complex and dynamic, but every day gave lessons in patience, caution, and observation. And in this slow and careful rhythm, the future was felt. The world was preparing for new challenges. Climate change and environmental disasters would dictate the conditions for survival, forming complex, sustainable ecosystems. Every day opened up new opportunities. Every evening there were lessons in observation, and the night preserved the breath of life, strengthening the foundation for future generations. Early morning shrouded the plains in a soft light. The fog still hung over the marshy areas and lowlands, hiding the land under a damp cover. The sun barely penetrated through the dense haze, illuminating the dew on the leaves of ferns and shrubs, the glitter of water in channels and ponds. The wind was light and cold, stirring the grass, tree leaves and moss, creating a quiet, rhythmic melody of the awakening world. The land breathed life, but there was an alarming tension, a harbinger of changes that were already beginning to affect the plains and forests, forcing the inhabitants to adapt and change their usual routes. The small archosaurs cautiously left their hiding places. Their movements were precise, their tails served as a balance, and their eyes kept a close eye on space. Every step was thought out, where the ground is softer, where the water is cleaner, where the shelter is safe. The youngsters followed the adults, absorbing every sound, every movement, and every decision. The world required observation, patience, and caution. As climate change began to affect vegetation, bodies of water, and the behavior of other animals, reservoirs began to show the first signs of change. The water level rose in low areas, temporary puddles formed in places, and in some ponds the water became cloudy. Fish moved cautiously to deeper places, invertebrates hid under vegetation and rocks, insects touched the surface of the water with caution. Small archosaurs studied the behavior of the inhabitants of reservoirs, trying to predict the consequences of changes and adjust their routes. The plains and forests reacted to the new conditions. Vegetation in the flooded areas bent and rose with the water, creating new trails and shelters. On land, certain plant species withered due to drought, leaving open spaces through which giant herbivores and large predators began to move. Small vertebrates, insects, and spiders sought new shelters, adapted to the changed routes, and developed new survival habits. Archosaurs slowly explored new areas. Their movements became precise, their reactions faster, their jaws tighter. They learned to distinguish safe areas from dangerous ones, find water and food, and protect young animals. Collective behavior manifested itself even more clearly. Joint exploration of the territory, risk assessment, and coordination of actions. These skills were essential for survival in the face of migration and climate change. By mid-afternoon, groups of large herbivores began to appear on the horizon, moving in search of food and safe reservoirs. Their slow but powerful movements changed the landscape. They trampled plants, trampled undergrowth, leaving trails followed by small inhabitants of the forest and plains. Small archosaurs watched them, using vegetation for cover and camouflage, adapting to new routes. Social groups of predators also reacted to migrations of giant herbivores. They adjusted hunting routes, joined forces for a joint strategy, and chose advantageous ambush positions. Lesser archosaurs and other small inhabitants of forests and plains observed them, using vegetation and terrain for protection. The ecosystem became the arena of a complex game in which survival depended on observation, caution, and the ability to use the possibilities of the environment. During the day, the sun warmed the plains and forests, activating plants and animals. Fish and invertebrates moved in the ponds, insects explored the surface and plants. Small archosaurs learned to hunt small animals, observe the behavior of predators and giants, and look for safe paths and shelters. Their strategies became more complex and their survival skills more sophisticated, forming a foundation for future generations. By evening, the plains were turning golden pink, and a light wind stirred the leaves and grass, creating a soft melody. The rustling of small animals and insects became more noticeable. Small archosaurs gathered in shelters, hiding their young and resting after a long day of observation. The night enveloped the world in soft darkness, but it was no longer empty. The breathing of water, the movement of foliage, and the quiet rustling of animals created a sense of harmony and stability, despite migration and climate change. The night also brought tension. Giant herbivores and large predators moved in search of food and water, forcing small and medium-sized inhabitants to adapt to new conditions. Small archosaurs listened to noises, observed and memorized routes and behavioral patterns of large creatures. Every move was a lesson. Every night was a training of patience, caution, and observation. The plains and forests had their own complex rhythm. Every sound, every movement mattered. Every blade of grass and every leaf influenced the balance of power. Small archosaurs mastered new strategies, observed social groups of predators and giant herbivores, and learned to use vegetation and terrain for protection. The world was becoming more complex and dynamic, but every day gave lessons in patience, caution, and observation. And there was a sense of the future in that slow, tense rhythm. The world was preparing for new challenges. Migrations, rare disasters, and climate change would dictate survival conditions, forming complex, sustainable ecosystems. Every day opened up new opportunities. Every evening there were lessons in observation, and the night preserved the breath of life, strengthening the foundation for future generations. Early morning once again enveloped the plains in a soft light. Fog rose from the lowlands and marshy areas, hiding the ground under a damp cover through which the sun's rays barely penetrated. A light wind stirred the grass, foliage of shrubs and trees, creating a quiet, rhythmic melody of the awakening world. The earth breathed life, but there was an unusual heaviness of the air, saturated with humidity and the smell of damp earth, a harbinger of the gradual formation of sustainable ecosystems, where each organism will take its place. The small archosaurs cautiously left their hiding places. Their movements were precise, their tails served as a balance, and their eyes kept a close eye on space. Every step was thought out, where the ground is softer, where the water is cleaner, where the shelter is safe. The youngsters followed the adults, absorbing every sound, every movement, and every decision. The world required observation, patience, and caution, but it gradually became more predictable, with a hint of stability that was not present during the early migrations. Life in the reservoirs has stabilized. Fish swam more confidently, invertebrates mastered vegetation, insects carefully touched the surface of the water. Every splash, every rippling circle on the water meant a signal to the observers, the movement of food, a potential threat, or new routes for small inhabitants. Small archosaurs learned to use reservoirs as landmarks, predict the behavior of predators and herbivores, and build safe routes through forests and plains. Plains and forest gradually formed stable vegetation zones. Ferns stretched out to the light, shrubs created dense shadows, trees rose higher, forming dense thickets. Mosses and lichens covered the rocks and tree roots, creating a soft base of undergrowth. Small vertebrates, insects, and spiders hid in these shadows. Every corner was filled with life, and every sound and movement was a signal for caution, surveillance, or protection. Archosaurs explored new areas of plains and forests with cautious confidence. Their movements became more precise, their reactions faster, their jaws tighter. They learned to distinguish safe areas from dangerous ones, find shelters and water, and protect young animals. Collective behavior was more pronounced. Joint exploration of the territory, threat monitoring, and coordination of actions. These skills became the foundation for future generations, ensuring survival in stable ecosystems. By mid-afternoon, the large herbivorous inhabitants were moving slowly but surely, forming trails and leaving trampled patches of undergrowth in their wake. The predators watched them, choosing places for ambushes and hunting. Small archosaurs and other small animals used vegetation for shelter, changed routes, and studied the behavior of giants. With each passing day, stable interactions between predators and herbivores formed, creating complex food webs. The plains and forests were gradually showing signs of stability. Social groups of predators occupied certain territories, coordinating hunting and protection. Herbivores formed herds, ensuring the protection of young animals and the rational use of plant resources. Lesser archosaurs and other small inhabitants adapted to the new conditions, exploring safe routes and hiding places. The world was becoming more predictable, with a hint of long-term balance. During the day, the sun shone brightly on the plains and forests, increasing the activity of plants and animals. Fish, invertebrates, and insects moved in reservoirs and on the surface. Small archosaurs observed large inhabitants, studied the behavior of predators and herbivores, and searched for safe paths and shelters. Survival strategies became more complex, and skills became more sophisticated. Gradually, sustainable food networks were formed, where each organism occupied its own niche. By evening, the plains were turning golden pink, and a light wind was stirring the leaves and grass, creating a soft melody. The rustling of small animals became more noticeable. The breathing of water and the quiet movements of forest dwellers created a sense of harmony and predictability. Small archosaurs gathered in shelters, hiding their young and resting after a long day of observation. The night enveloped the world in soft darkness, but it was no longer empty. The breath of life, the movements of foliage and the quiet rustling of animals created a sense of stability. The night brought calmness and attention at the same time. Giant herbivores and large predators adjusted routes, maintaining the balance that was already forming in the ecosystem. Small archosaurs observed rustles and shadows and memorized the behavior of large creatures. Every move was a lesson. Every night was a training of patience, caution, and observation. The plains and forests had their own slow but steady rhythm. Every sound and movement mattered. Every blade of grass and leaf influenced the balance of power. Small archosaurs mastered new strategies, observed social groups of predators and herbivores, and learned to use vegetation and terrain for protection. The world was becoming more complex and dynamic, but every day brought lessons in patience, caution, and observation. And there was a sense of the future in this slow, steady rhythm. The world was preparing for new challenges by forming stable ecosystems with complex food webs. Every day opened up new opportunities, every evening brought lessons in caution, and the night preserved the breath of life, strengthening the foundation for future generations and creating the first sustainable ecosystems of the late Paleozoic. Early morning enveloped the plains and forests in a heavy haze. A light mist rose from the lowlands, hiding the ground under a damp cover, and the barely penetrated sun rays were reflected on the shiny leaves of ferns and moss. The air was saturated with the smell of damp earth and vegetation, but there was also an unusual tension, a harbinger of changes that this land had not known before. The rustling of small animals, usually barely discernible in the morning stillness, now sounded louder, as if warning of the danger that was already rising from the horizon. The first silhouettes of new predators appeared on the plains, large, strong, and unusual in body structure. Their movements were extremely precise. Each step accurately took into account the balance, each glance, the distance and speed of potential prey. These creatures didn't just hunt, they changed the dynamics of the entire ecosystem. The fish in the ponds hid fearfully, the insects went into dense thickets, and the small archosaurs and other vertebrates carefully rearranged the routes. The world has stopped being predictable. These predators possessed a sophisticated hunting strategy. They followed the tracks of herbivores, building long lines of observation, studied the behavior of giants, and predicted the herd's reaction. Their claws and jaws were adapted to different types of prey, from small archosaurs to large herbivores moving slowly across the plain. Every hunting step mattered. To miss a moment was to miss the food. Herbivores sensed the presence of new threats. Their gigantic bodies, usually confident and slow, were now becoming vulnerable. They gathered in herds, grouped more closely, and moved to more protected areas where dense vegetation or bodies of water created natural barriers. Small archosaurs studied the behavior of giants, using their shadow and protection for their roots and hiding places. During the day, the sun shone brightly on the plains and forests, revealing every detail of the predators' movements. Their rustling, barely discernible among the leaves and grass, seemed louder in the silence of the morning. Fish floated to the surface, insects rose into the air, and small vertebrates carefully chose new routes through dense vegetation. Small archosaurs learned to read signs. When the shadow is stronger, when the leaves move, it is a signal of the presence of danger. The first collisions of giant herbivores with new predators appeared on the horizon. Tension was in the air. Herbivores tried to keep young individuals inside the herd, coordinate movements, create barriers, and use vegetation for protection. The predators moved with precision and patience, waiting, watching for a weak or detached animal. This new level of interaction created a more complex, intense, and dynamic ecosystem. The forests and plains began to show signs of a new balance. Predators established themselves in certain territories, herbivores mastered safe trails, and small archosaurs adapted to the changed rhythm of life. The ecosystem gradually formed new food webs. Each organism occupied a specific niche, and every night and every day became a lesson in survival and caution. In the evening, the plains turned into crimson-golden shades. The light wind stirred the leaves and grass, creating a quiet, meditative melody. The sounds of animals became clearer. The breathing of water in ponds, the movement of leaves, the quiet footsteps of small and medium-sized animals. The night enveloped the world in soft darkness, but it was no longer empty. Every sound and movement signified the interaction of forces: who hunts, who defends, who watches. The night was a time of learning and adjustment. The new predators moved cautiously, checking the territory and watching the herbivores. Small archosaurs memorized new routes, landmarks, and behavioral patterns of large predators and giants. Every move was a lesson. Every night was a training of patience and attentiveness. The world was gradually entering a new phase. Extraordinary predators were changing their usual routes, forming new food webs and building a balance of power. Small archosaurs, giant herbivores, and medium-sized predators learned to interact in the changed conditions, creating complex and stable structures. This slow rhythm was intense, dynamic, and required constant observation, and there was a sense of the future in that slow, tense rhythm. The world was preparing for new challenges, where strength, strategy, and mindfulness determined survival. Every day opened up new opportunities. Every evening there were lessons in caution, and the night preserved the breath of life, strengthening the foundation for future generations and forming a new level of ecosystems of the late Paleozoic. Early morning enveloped the plains in a thick haze. The first rays of the sun barely penetrated, reflecting on the leaves of ferns and wet grass. The air was heavy, saturated with the smell of damp earth and resinous trees. The wind brought a premonition of change, a harbinger that the usual rhythm of life on the plains and in the forests would be disrupted. The small archosaurs cautiously left their hiding places, each movement carefully thought out, each sound vibration was perceived as a signal to be attentive. At first it was a slight rumble in the distance, the trembling of the earth, a faint, barely perceptible sound that quickly intensified. The fish in the ponds jumped up, the invertebrates hid, the insects froze on the leaves. The small archosaurs listened carefully to the vibrations, assessing what was causing this unusual movement of the air and earth. Even the giant herbivores, accustomed to slow changes, became confused and began to gather in dense groups, trying to protect the young and keep the herd intact. The first explosion appeared on the horizon. From afar, a column of smoke and ash rose above the forests. The volcanic activity was sudden and destructive, but the world did not yet understand its full force. Dust settled on the leaves and grass, giving the greenery a greyish hue, and the water in the ponds and channels became cloudy. The predators slowed down, studying the new conditions. Their usual routes were disrupted, but the hunter's instinct remained tense. In the afternoon, the ground shook again. Small archosaurs and other small animals hid in shelters, hiding under moss and tree roots. The giant herbivores walked slowly towards the safe areas, trampling down the undergrowth and creating trails for followers. Predators, on the contrary, had to adapt, looking for weak or separated individuals. Every step, every shadow, and every sound became vital. The light rain, which usually brought relief, now turned into a disaster. The water mixed with volcanic ash, forming viscous mud on the plains and in the lowlands. Fish and invertebrates sought deeper waters, insects climbed higher on plants, small archosaurs sought new routes and shelters. Herbivores tried to go to safe zones using the trails they had trodden earlier, but the mud slowed down their movements, creating chaos in the herds. Social groups of predators began to exhibit unusual behavior. Some joined forces, using the new conditions for hunting, while others chose ambush positions on high ground and near reservoirs, where the migration of herbivores was predictable. Every step required calculation. Every pause could be crucial for survival. Small archosaurs observed these changes, learned to use new routes and shelters, adapting to a catastrophic environment. By evening, the ash gradually settled, and the plains turned into grey-orange shades. The wind stirred the leaves, bringing the smell of burning and damp earth. Fish explored the ponds again, insects returned to the leaves, and small archosaurs cautiously emerged from hiding, exploring new conditions. The giant herbivores moved slowly, the herds grouped for protection, but every step felt like a harbinger of a new dynamic on the plains. The night enveloped the world in a soft but heavy darkness. The rustling of predators and giants became more distinct. The breathing of water in ponds and the quiet movements of foliage created a sense of intense harmony. Small archosaurs listened, memorized new routes and behavioral patterns of large animals. Every move was a lesson. Every night was a test of patience, caution, and observation. The next day, the changes continued. Small floods, cracks in the ground, and fires left by a lightning strike created new barriers and routes. The world was becoming more unpredictable, requiring maximum adaptability from each inhabitant. Giant herbivores sought safe places, predators explored new hunting routes, small archosaurs and invertebrates learned to exploit new conditions. And there was a sense of the future in this chaos. The ecosystem has been put to the test, forming sustainable survival strategies and new food webs. Every day opened up new opportunities. Every evening there were lessons in caution, and the night preserved the breath of life, strengthening the foundation for future generations, showing that even in disasters nature seeks balance and stability. Early morning enveloped the plains in a light haze. Fog rose over lowlands and swampy areas, hiding the land under a damp cover. The first rays of the sun barely penetrated through the dense air, illuminating the sheen of dew on the leaves of ferns and moss. The wind stirred the grass and leaves of the trees, creating a quiet melody of the awakening world. The earth breathed life, but a new resilience was felt. The ecosystem was gradually recovering from recent disasters, forming new structures and routes for the inhabitants. The small archosaurs cautiously left their hiding places. Their movements became more confident. Their tails served as a balance, and their eyes closely followed the space. Every step was thought out. Where the ground is softer, where the water is cleaner, where it is safe. The young followed the adults, exploring new routes and hiding places. The world required observation, but now there was a sense of predictability. Space was gradually being restored, and life was finding new ways. Reservoirs began to fill up with clean water again. The fish slowly returned to their usual routes. The invertebrates mastered the vegetation, and the insects touched the surface of the water again. Small archosaurs used reservoirs as landmarks, predicted the behavior of predators and herbivores, building safe routes through forests and plains. The world was beginning to recover from disasters, and every organism was adapting to the new conditions. The plains and forests gradually restored vegetation. Ferns stretched out to the light, shrubs and trees created dense thickets. Mosses and lichens covered the rocks and tree roots, creating a soft base of undergrowth. Small vertebrates, insects and spiders were hiding in these shadows again. Every corner was filled with life, and every sound and movement was a signal for caution or observation. Archosaurs explored the restored areas of plains and forests with cautious confidence. Their movements became precise, their reactions faster, their jaws tighter. They learned to distinguish safe areas from dangerous ones, find shelters and water, and protect young animals. Collective behavior was more pronounced. Joint exploration of the territory, threat monitoring, and coordination of actions. These skills became the foundation for future generations, ensuring survival in the restored ecosystem. By the middle of the day, giant herbivores appeared on the horizon again. Their movements are slow but steady, forming new trails through forests and plains. The predators watched them, choosing suitable hunting positions. Lesser archosaurs and other small inhabitants used vegetation and new routes for shelter. The social structures of the herd became more stable, creating new ways to protect the young and rational use of resources. The social groups of predators also adapted to the changed environment. Some occupied new territories using the features of the landscape, while others built more complex hunting strategies, taking into account the movements of giant herbivores. Every move required precision, and every pause could be decisive. Small archosaurs observed these changes, exploring new routes and adapting their behavior. During the day, the sun shone brightly on the plains and forests, activating plants and animals. Fish, invertebrates and insects moved in reservoirs and on the surface. Small archosaurs observed large inhabitants, studied the behavior of predators and herbivores, and searched for safe paths and shelters. Survival strategies became more complex and skills became more sophisticated. Gradually, sustainable food networks were formed, where each organism occupied its own niche. By evening, the plains were turning golden pink, and a light wind stirred the leaves and grass, creating a soft melody. The rustling of small animals became clearer. The breathing of water in ponds, the movement of leaves, the quiet footsteps of small and medium-sized animals. Small archosaurs gathered in shelters, hiding their young and resting after a day of observation. The night enveloped the world in soft darkness, but it was no longer empty. The breath of life, the movements of foliage and the quiet rustling of animals created a sense of new stability. The night brought calmness and attention at the same time. Giant herbivores and predators maintained the balance that was already forming in the restored ecosystem. Small archosaurs memorized new routes, landmarks, and behavioral patterns of large predators and giants. Every move was a lesson. Every night was a training of patience and attentiveness. The world was gradually entering a new phase. The ecosystem had stabilized. New territorial boundaries and sustainable food webs were forming. Small archosaurs, giant herbivores, and predators developed new strategies for interaction, creating complex, stable structures. This slow rhythm was intense and required constant monitoring, but it already gave hope for a stable existence of the species. And there was a sense of the future in this slow, steady rhythm. The world was preparing for new challenges, where adaptation, strategy, and mindfulness determined survival. Every day opened up new opportunities. Every evening there were lessons in caution, and the night preserved the breath of life, strengthening the foundation for future generations and creating new sustainable ecosystems of the late Paleozoic. Early morning enveloped the plains in a light haze. Fog rose from the lowlands and marshy areas, hiding the ground under a damp cover. The first rays of the sun broke through the dense air, illuminating the sheen of dew on the leaves of ferns and moss. A light wind stirred the grass and leaves of the trees, creating a quiet, rhythmic melody of the awakening world. Against the background of the morning silence, a new life of the ecosystem was felt, where every movement and sound became part of the complex interaction of species. There was a pack of large predators in the center of the plains. Their movements were precise and coordinated, their eyes carefully following the space. Each member of the group took his place. The most experienced stayed at the edges, the young ones inside, protected by their comrades. Signs of hierarchy were forming within the pack. The elders and the strongest dictated the pace of movement, determined the hunting zones and monitored the safety of the young. Even small archosaurs and other small animals listened to these signals, studying the behavior and strategy of a large group. Giant herbivores gradually formed their own social structures. The young individuals followed the adults, trying to keep to the center of the herd. The larger and more experienced leaders guided the movement, choosing safe paths through forests and plains. Every step, every pause mattered, where the grasses were more lush, where the water was cleaner, where the threat of predators was minimal. Small archosaurs and medium-sized vertebrates closely watched these herds, adapting their routes and hiding among the dense vegetation. Water areas played a key role in the social interaction of species. Fish and invertebrates returned to their usual places, creating a breeding ground for predators. Insects hovering above the water became indicators of the presence of larger animals. Small archosaurs used these signs to orient themselves and predict the behavior of predators and giants. The complexity of interactions increased. Each group of inhabitants took into account the presence of others, forming stable networks of observation and adaptation. By the middle of the day, predator activity was increasing on the plains. The older individuals organized the hunt, assigning roles within the group. Some stayed on high ground for observation, while others built lines of ambush. Young predators learned by studying the behavior of their elders, repeating movements and reactions. These collective strategies allowed production to be more predictable and stable, but at the same time increased tension and competition between groups. The social connections of giant herbivores manifested themselves in the constant coordination of movement. The herd leaders guided the movements, protected the young, and helped the weak individuals avoid threats. Each decision was a collective one, although it was subject to the authority of the elders. Small archosaurs observed them, studying defensive strategies and movement routes, which allowed them to move safely in difficult conditions. During the day, the sun shone brightly on the plains and forests. The activity of aquatic and terrestrial inhabitants increased. Fish and invertebrates moved in reservoirs, insects explored plants, small archosaurs moved cautiously. Predators coordinated the hunt, giant herbivores maintained the integrity of the herd. Every movement, every sound became part of a complex social system where survival depended on observing roles and strategies. By evening, the plains were turning golden pink. The light wind stirred the leaves and grass, creating a soft melody. The rustling of animals became clearer. The breathing of water in ponds and the quiet footsteps of small animals created a sense of harmony. Small archosaurs gathered in shelters, hiding their young and resting after a day of observation. The night enveloped the world in soft darkness, but it was no longer empty. Every sound and movement signified interaction, social structure and stability. The night was a time of learning and consolidating social roles. The predators were checking the territory, ensuring the protection of the group and hunting. Giant herbivores maintained order in the herd, protected the young and ensured the rational use of vegetation. Small archosaurs observed these interactions, memorizing routes, behaviors, and signals. Every move was a lesson. Every night was a training of patience and observation. The world was gradually entering a new phase. Social structures were becoming more complex, territories were becoming more stable, and food webs were becoming balanced. Small archosaurs, giant herbivores, and predators developed new strategies for collective behavior, creating stable and predictable structures in the ecosystem. This slow rhythm required constant attention, but it already ensured the stable existence of the species, and in this slow, socially saturated rhythm the future was felt. The world was preparing for new challenges, where collective behavior, strategy, and mindfulness determined survival. Every day opened up new opportunities, every evening there were lessons in caution, and the night preserved the breath of life, strengthening the foundation for future generations and forming stable social structures of the late Paleozoic. A thick morning fog enveloped the plains and forests, hiding the land under a damp and cold cover, as if the very air forbade rapid movement. The sun barely penetrated the grey-white haze, illuminating the wet leaves of ferns and slippery rocks. The ground seemed unyielding. The lowlands were filled with murky water, the trails were trampled by giant herbivores, and some areas of the forest were covered with dense thickets that were impossible to pass through. Every movement seemed limited, every path a carefully planned survival strategy, where procrastination was punishable by starvation, danger, or death. Small archosaurs cautiously left their hiding places. Every movement was well thought out, every path was estimated in advance. The grasses they were used to were flooded or covered in mud, and shallow ponds that had been a source of food and safety turned into traps for the inexperienced. The forest was full of obstacles. Dense thickets of ferns made it impossible to pass quickly. Old trees fell onto the paths, creating barriers, and moss and lichens covered with volcanic ash slid underfoot. Every animal that decided to move without caution was in danger. Predators, large and small, faced severe restrictions, territorial barriers, limited hunting areas, dense vegetation, and harsh weather conditions. The older individuals dictated the order, forbidding the younger ones to enter dangerous areas or retreat without permission. The young people learned from their mistakes and those of their peers. One wrong step and they were trapped or easy prey. The pack formed strict rules: who goes hunting, who stays to guard the territory, who watches the movement of herbivores. Violating these rules meant immediate punishment, showing strength and discipline within the group. Giant herbivores were also subject to strict restrictions. Herds could not disperse. The leaders determined safe routes, determined the speed of movement and feeding areas. Young individuals had no right to lag behind or leave the centre of the herd. Paths to water and vegetation were limited, and any deviation could lead to a collision with predators, getting stuck in the mud, or being killed by falling trees. Each animal felt the prohibitions and boundaries, forced to obey the rhythm of the herd and the unpredictability of the environment. During the day, the sun barely warmed the plains, but the hot air mixed with fog and ash, creating a suffocating atmosphere. The small archosaurs moved cautiously between the trails, assessing plant density, soil moisture, and possible shelters. Any mistake was deadly. Predators could be on high ground, hidden among the trees, ready for a surprise attack, or giant herbivores could knock over small inhabitants with a random movement. The forbidding elements of the environment controlled life, forced each animal to be attentive and careful, to teach patience and prudence. Ponds that seemed safe were now filled with ash, mud, and overflowing mud. Fish hid in deep places, insects flew up to higher air, and small vertebrates searched for new routes. Every movement was limited by physical conditions. A pond could be impassable, a path could be flooded, and thickets could be an insurmountable barrier. Archosaurs and predators, accustomed to the usual rules of movement, now had to obey the new prohibitions, assess the risk, and look for workarounds. The social groups of predators continued to operate with a rigid hierarchy. The older individuals controlled the territory, restricted the younger ones' access to hunting areas, and prohibited the violation of routes. Any step outside the established boundaries was punishable by assault or exclusion from the group. Young predators learned to survive by observing and imitating their elders. Every action and decision was strictly limited by environmental conditions and pack rules. Giant herbivores faced other prohibitions. The lines of trails, predetermined by herds, did not allow them to deviate. Dense forests created mazes where one wrong turn led to death. The youngsters were under constant guard by their elders, who forbade independent retreats. The trails were limited by terrain, vegetation density, and the presence of predators, creating the feeling that the earth itself dictated the rules. By evening, the plains were turning grey-orange. The wind stirred the leaves, bringing the smell of burning and damp earth. Every move was restrained, every step carefully thought out. Fish explored the ponds again, insects returned to the leaves, small archosaurs carefully chose routes, avoiding dangerous areas. The night enveloped the world in a soft but heavy darkness, where every path and every sound meant restriction, prohibition, and necessary caution. The night was a time of strict discipline. The predators controlled the territory, checked the boundaries of hunting zones, ensuring order and compliance with the rules. Giant herbivores maintained the structure of the herd, protected the young, and controlled movement along the trails. Small archosaurs and other small animals listened to signs and signals, assessed the possibility of movement, and avoided violating prohibitions. Every action had consequences, every movement was limited by environmental conditions and established rules of survival. The world gradually sank into a continuous rhythm of prohibitions and restrictions. Every day opened up new barriers, every evening new rules, and the night maintained a breath of rigor and discipline. Small archosaurs, giant herbivores, and predators developed new strategies, adapted to restrictions and prohibitions, and formed complex but stable survival structures. This slow, continuous rhythm created the feeling that nature itself had established a law that could not be violated, and obeying it was the only way to survive. And in this world of prohibitions, the future was felt. Every mistake was punished, every strategic thought mattered, and adaptation, caution, and adherence to the rules determined survival. The world was preparing for new challenges, but every day, every evening, and every night formed the basis for future generations, creating a strictly controlled and limited ecosystem of the late Paleozoic.